We built Spartans to save humanity. But when the wars ended and the cameras looked away, someone else kept building. Not in barracks, in boardrooms, in back alleys, in debtors' dens on fringe worlds. They started with street alchemy, rumble drugs that burned through the body faster than courage could cool. Then, a medical giant asked a dangerous question. What if we made them better? Janissaries. Soldiers without oaths. Products with pulse rates. And somewhere between mercy and profit, the line disappeared. This is the hidden history of the super soldiers who don't wear the eagle. And the price we'll all pay when companies learn to manufacture heroes. Hey everyone, welcome back to Installation 00, and today, at long last, we're diving into the superhumans that are now beginning to emerge within the Halo universe. A class of super soldiers that are not built with the stamp of approval from the UNSC and the Office of Naval Intelligence. Instead, ones that were built at an opportune moment, when the true super soldiers of humanity were preoccupied with battles from within and without. But also the history of these now corporate superhumans and their origins within the insurrection. Rumble drugs. Improvised augmentation cocktails, designated Waverly-class augmenters by ONI, were meant to blast past human safety limits of strength and injury tolerance. One documented mix included a PCP derivative, slow-release synthetic adrenaline, and rapid coagulant with a beta blocker added to keep the user focused. The trade-off was severe. Mental instability, loss of control, and immediate physiological damage. Users often died before reaching their target. During the insurrection, the first instances of the rumble drug being used was on Hela and Fermirol, where insurrectionist fighters would juice up to try to face down the dreaded Spartan 2s. A mismatch that ultimately made the drugs infamous and spurred ONI's Waverly class designator. The subjects who took these rumble drugs were witnessed of taking half a magazine from an MA5B assault rifle without even flinching, descending into sheer rage and pushing forwards towards the Spartans, but just as easily turning on their own allies. ONI's analysis of these drugs found that they unencumbered the body's normal safety limits, and with these biological limitations effectively unshackled, the individuals had enormous strength, but a complete lack of mental and physical control, which ultimately led to almost instantaneous physiological damage. Rumble drugs were dirty, cheap, immediately effective, and catastrophically unsafe. They were the template for non-UNSC human augmentation, and this change came from a wholly unexpected source. It came from Optican, a medical megacorporation that were responsible for creating Medigel, first aid stations, and even mood-settling drugs like statinazole. They were a trusted megacorporation with Gen 3 Mjolnir medical attachments and a post-war partnership with Mizraia Armory on the EV-44 Nightingale, Optican's own med tilt rotor. However, ONI had Optican under active investigation in 2556 after the Cedra terror incident. Haunted by Arcadia and disillusioned by the UNSC's weakness post-created, CEO Adam Andrews decided Optican should fill the gap. By 2560, he traded the focus cannon from the Arcadia Scarab to the Kigyar broker Norfell for crates of rumble drugs, explicitly illegal, with the aim of researching and stabilizing them. Immediately following Andrews' departure, Spartan 2 Team Omega kills the Kigyar intermediaries and arrange the scene so Norfell won't suspect Andrews, keeping him insulated. The Janissary entry notes Optican's research on stabilizing rumble drugs as part of the broader non-UNSC Janissary ecosystem, suggesting there was a degree of Oni approval for these efforts. But again, that's the unofficial story. The official story is that there is now a mainstream contractor with the UNSC and Oni now dabbling in illicit augmenters, which ultimately blurs the line between defense partner and unlicensed super soldier foundry. The Oni label Janissary became Oni's term for non-UNSC human super soldiers, initially insurrectionist creations, but later expanded to criminal, corporate and colonial programs. Think Spartan analogues grown outside the law or outside UNSC control. Post-2552, a power armor gold rush lowered the barrier to entry. Suits like Buccaneer, Reijin, Shinobi, Taishin, and black market sensor kits like Dianthus showed up in catalogues and arms markets, not just UNSC. This proliferation is the hardware side of the Janissary trend. Once armor and augmentation pathways existed off the UNSC's leash, you get commodified super soldiers, people built and traded as a profitable weapon system. On Venezia, cartel-funded power brokers, notably the Yonet Umrad, run pipelines that conscript indebted families' children, train them, and hire them out for mercenary work, sometimes even contracting with the banished. These would then field in distinct kits, such as the Assailer, Boggart, Taskmaster, Conqueror, all platforms that became synonymous with these non-UNSC superhumans. But the UNSC still quietly seized an Assailer and sent it to the Anvil Station for further study. Venezia shows the business model, super soldiers as a cartel product, and due to Venezia's status, this allowed transfactional ties and tech laundering, which ultimately highlighted the key risks of unsolicited and unlicensed super soldier creation. These super soldiers could very easily fall into the hands of humanity's enemies. But this is a very deep and complex problem, the risks and rewards of corporate superhumans. For the short-term and technical and medical risks, there is obviously acute toxicity and neuropsychiatric blowback. The PCP derivative and adrenaline cocktails explains the rage states, confusion and loss of inhibition. The coagulant and metabolic stress make strokes, arrhythmias and organ damage very likely. Even with stabilization, you're taming a mechanism that works by breaking safety governors. So you must expect long-term cardiomyopathy, microvascular damage, PTSD-like syndromes and dependency profiles, mechanisms we can infer from the documented components and outcomes. There's obviously also a quality assurance problem. Corporate incentives can prioritize repeatable output over elite selection and indoctrination that can produce more superhumans, but with higher variance and failure modes. The Spartans avoided through brutal screening and oversight. There are understandably upsides, which may be why Oni were expressing at least a discrete interest, frontier security and disaster response being high among them. Having more capable responders, enhanced medics and protectors could genuinely save lives where the UNSC's reach is thin. There's very obvious tech spillover with medical R&D, regenerative gels, prosthetics and exo-rehab, which would tend to spill into civilian care, and Optican already straddles that line, but the downsides are pronounced. Arms race economics, for example. If augmentation becomes a commodity, cartels, warlords and corporations can field private armies, fracturing security and forcing colonies into pay-for-protection regimes. Venezia, in this circumstance, is the prototype. Can also lead to labour and class stratification, where a durable augmented caste creates new inequities, particularly if corporate plans include debt-indentured pipelines, or exclusivity via employer-tied org care, as well as concerns over legitimacy crisis for the UNSC. The more credible non-UNSC super soldiers become, the more UNSC monopoly on sanctioned force erodes, politically and tactically. The more capable non-UNSC super soldiers, the less humanity will tolerate UNSC exclusive super soldiers. There have also been concerns fielded regarding what would happen with the children of Spartan 4s and Janissaries. Basically, as the proliferation of these super soldier programs gets larger and larger, we have already hundreds of Spartan 4 super soldiers whom can leave active duty, settle down and have children. Add to this the fact that we also have a growing population of non-UNSC super soldiers, the Janissaries. What would happen if a Spartan 4 and a Janissary unwittingly settled down together and had children? Would that be a good or bad result? And while the concern has been fielded, I feel it's a non-issue. Spartan 4s receive adult-onset, medically regulated somatic augments, not germline edits, so direct genetic inheritance of those changes is unlikely. Their kids might inherit training culture and socioeconomic access, but not the augments by default. And this general inference is consistent with how Spartan 4s are made versus how Spartan 2's biochemistry is made. We've had examples of Spartan 2 augmentations becoming inheritable. We haven't had any examples of the Spartan 4s. As for the Janissaries, they lean on drugs and exoskeletons, not known germline work. The rumble drug pathway is pharmacological and acutely toxic, so it doesn't imply transmissible traits. So as far as cross-program offspring, if two enhanced parents from different legacies, Spartan 4 and Janissary, have a child, biological compatibility issues only arise if a program uses germline edits, which are not evidenced in either the Spartan 4s or the Janissaries. However, if such a child later undergoes augments, prior epigenetic predispositions, scar tissue, or latent vascular vulnerabilities from parental exposure during gestation or from the child's own exposure later in life, could interact negatively with rumble drug style pathways, e.g. higher risk of arrhythmia and stroke under adrenergic stress. However, I hasten to add that that's medical inference grounded in the rumble drug mechanism and isn't explicitly canon. So as far as positive interactions, the only plausible positive mix would be training and exo rather than drug and drug. So basically a culture of discipline and access to safe exos rather than stacking volatile pharmacology. But away from this, there are clear conflicts of interest now that Optican have ventured into the superhuman sphere, particularly in the dark days of the Created Uprising. What we know is that Oni had Optican under active investigation in 2556 following the Cedron fallout. In 2560, Andrews illegally obtained rumble drugs via Norfell, intending to study and stabilize them. Omega Team then eliminated the Kig-Yar middlemen and kept Andrews insulated. The Janissary file explicitly lists Optican stabilization research as part of the non-UNSC super soldier landscape. From this, we can infer Oni's posture on this particular situation. For the near term, they'd probably co-opt and compartmentalize. Omega Team's cleanup strongly implies a desire to control outcomes rather than burn Andrews now. So it's reasonable to expect that Oni may be quietly data capturing, basically allowing Oni to measure whether stabilized augmenters are useful or containable. In the midterm, if stabilization works and Optican remains pliable, Oni may develop licenses and co-develop these Janissary programs, limited use protocols, crash dose combat life-saving, controlled exo interfaces, while ring-fencing corporate programs to avoid a full private army class. If Optican overreaches, this may lead to independent mass fielding, export to colonies and cartels that may lead to major incidents hitting the news. Oni would then pivot to containment and legal pressure, revoking contracts, investigations, covert disruption, or direct dismantlement under security pretexts. And in the long term, it's difficult to say. The galaxy is in a very turbulent time at the moment, and the political winds change very rapidly. it would depend on UEG appetite for Janissary and super soldier programs post-created. Political decisions would have to decide whether Janissaries become auxiliaries under Oni, or if they become a problem that needs to be erased. Given Oni's history, the most likely equilibrium is controlled proliferation. Enough capability to plug gaps, but never enough to rival Spartans. Ultimately, the insurrectionists' rumble drugs were the seed. The post-war tech economy was the soil, Venezia is the greenhouse, and Optican is the first blue-chip firm willing to elicit augmenters into a repeatable product. That combination ultimately guarantees more non-UNSC superhumans. Some will be helpful. Many will be destabilizing. For Optican, the safest path is quiet alignment with Oni and strict internal controls. The fastest path to disaster is scaling Janissary outputs into corporate security divisions or export channels. Oni will tolerate and co-opt what it can control, and erase what it can't. We began with desperation, rumble drugs that burned bright and died fast. Then came the pivot, laboratory shareholders, and a promise to stabilize what was never meant to be safe. And in the shadows between peace and profit, the Janissaries were born. This is the ledger we've tallied today. Power that once belonged to legends is becoming a line item. Heroism, a product SKU. Optican stands at the fulcrum, partner to the institutions sworn to protect us, architect of a technology that could unmake their monopoly on strength. Oni can co-opt it or crush it. Either path exacts a price. But the real decision doesn't sit on a black desk or behind a redaction bar. It's ours. Because if superhumanity is something you can buy, lease or inherit, then the future will ask what happens when two legacies meet one body, when different augmentation lineages collide in single life. Do we create a generation tempered by discipline and duty, or stratify our species into castes of the enhanced and the expendable? There is a version of tomorrow where augmentation becomes a covenant with society. Safer bodies on the frontier, medics who move mountains, strength lent to the vulnerable. There is another where enhancements are auctioned to the highest bidder, and we outsource courage to whoever owns the patents. We can treat people like weapons, or treat power like a responsibility. We can let fear write the next chapter, or we can insist that the word humanity means more than our biology. It means what we owe each other. Rumble drugs lit the spark. Corporations fanned the flame. Now the blaze is at our door. The question isn't whether we can build more super soldiers. We can. The question is whether we'll remember why we built heroes in the first place. And until next time. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, kindly tap that like button, and if you're not already subscribed and want to see more stuff like this, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss future uploads. Pop a comment down below telling me what you thought of today's video, or if you want me to cover something specific in the near future. I want to take this opportunity to thank and give shoutouts to my patrons and YouTube supporters: Spartan10148, my singular contender class Ancilla, the triumvirate of minds within my installations Metarch, Falcon, Jordan and Poseidon, my 7 installation monitors Sophia, Ashley, Esoteric, Spartan1029, Chris, Orion and Shane, the crush of sub-monitors Legion, Ryan, Lebrat, Spartan0137, Element 0, J3, Cult, Evermore's, Personal Devil, Scion Esports, Phantasma, Ashton and 191 Shaken Lightbulb, my fleet of Strato Sentinels, my most loyal of Enforcers, and every single one of the awesome people supporting the channel over on Patreon. My Tier 0 Transcendent YouTube members Spartan137 again, Maury, Jimbo and Balaz and all other YouTube members keeping my installation functional on that glorious vacuum energy. I cannot thank you all enough. Shout out to John because... And if you like what I'm doing here, consider supporting the channel on one of the support links in the description to net yourself some tasty merch and help keep the channel going. Take it easy everyone, and find peace in the domain.